Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and back to the podcast. Today I interview Electra Rayne, who is a full service sex worker at a Nevada brothel. So we talk all about that and what it's like to work in a brothel. We also dive into some of her other endeavors. She is also a porn star. She owns her own queer porn company. I actually found her on TikTok because she shares educational content around sex, around what it's like to work in a brothel, what it's like to procure services at a brothel. So while we go over most of that stuff here in this episode, you definitely want to give her a follow. I put all of her information in the show notes. She's just a really cool person. Right when I saw her content, I got chills and I was like, oh, I have to reach out to this woman. She's so embodied in her work. And I just love having these open conversations, these shame-free conversations around sex and sexuality, which is why I love interviewing people with a sex work background. I'm also going to make another little note here. About maybe a third of the way through the podcast, or maybe halfway through, we talk about her friend Jade. Jade is a transgender woman who is also in sex work, and we had an awesome conversation, and that will go up in the next couple of weeks. So in case you get to that part and you're like, who are they talking about? Don't worry, you're going to get a chance to meet Jade. Last thing I'm going to plug is I am launching a program probably pretty soon, but I'm building out the waitlist right now. It's called Reborn. It's all about the alchemical journey to erotic sovereignty using Jungian psychology and doing sexual shadow work. We're connecting the primal aspects to the spiritual aspects of sexuality. And it's designed that you step out of this multi-week experience knowing yourself better, less shame, more confidence, deeper understanding of who you are. If you want to get on the wait list, you just have to answer a 5-question survey and you will get $100 off when we go live. So if you are interested in that, definitely hit the link in the show notes. Other than that, thanks for being here, guys, and on to the interview. Tell me about you and your beginning story of how you got into sex work and what you're doing now.
Oh man, that's a bigger question than it sounds, I guess. Hi, my name's Electra Rayne. I'm 28. I'm originally from Chicago, but I live in Las Vegas now. And I have been in the adult industry in some form for almost a decade now, which is like, I don't know, crazy to be able to say that. I remember like when I was first dancing, even there used to be a Facebook group for like women who had been in the industry for at least a decade. And I remember being like, wow, like maybe someday, but like seems so crazy and so far-fetched. And now here I am, which is kind of wild. So I have worked in pretty much every legal sector of the sex industry. These days, I am most known for working as a courtesan at Sherry's Ranch legal brothel in Pahrump, Nevada. The TikToks that I make that are educational about what it's like to work at a legal brothel and also just like sex ed and things like that in general. I do porn like as a performer. I direct porn, and I also am the founder and director of queercrush.com, the only lesbian adult site created 100% by and for dykes ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think, well, one, I love that. I love queercrush.com. I know it's not meant for, young people. It's obviously meant for adults, but I was like, man, I wish there was porn like that out there when I was exploring the internet when
Yeah.
I was 16.
Yeah, so I don't know that I should say this or not, but we're just gonna start controversial right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be clear, we are very strict. Our marketing is only for people over the age of 18. We have parental control tracking software on the website so that if you use any parental controls on your device, our site is completely blocked. Like we are not marketing to teenagers. Personally, I actually think it would be good for teenagers to see, like maybe not all porn in the entire world, but like certain types of content, right? Like I think that
Hmm.
seeing a pornographic video is different than like performing in a pornographic video, obviously.
Hmm.
Like we
Hmm.
should never ever have young teenagers doing that. But I definitely do think like okay, so because in America we have such a flawed sex education system, porn has kind of become de facto a form of sex ed, which is not what it's meant to be at all. That's like watching martial arts movies and then being like, okay, I'm gonna go try martial arts because I watched all these martial arts movies. Like porn is stunts, and it shouldn't have to carry our sex education. But because of the reality of the world that we
Yeah.
live in, it sometimes kind of does. And I think that when you have sites like ours, we're definitely not the only one. When you have sites like ours that are just dedicated to showing like what does the reality of sex look like, and especially what does the reality of sex look like for people of all different body types, of all different ability levels, of all different ages, all different experience levels, like that actually can be really educational. And so like to add a little bit of context for like, you know this, but for listeners who may not
Mhm.
know this, Queer Crush is like 100% real. It's actual queer folks who choose their own partners, their own wardrobe, their own styling, and they do whatever they want in their scenes. And not only do we not tell them what to do, we also don't cut unless they specifically ask for a break. So you're seeing everything, including like using lube and drinking water and doing check-ins and a silly little blooper when things didn't go quite right, like things like that. And that's a lot of what is missing from a lot of porn.
Yeah, it's so incredibly real and refreshing. What inspired you? Is it from your work in the adult industry? Like, what inspires you where you're like, you know what, I'm going to start this company and I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, so to be perfectly honest, part of my motivation to start some kind of site was that I wasn't making enough money as a performer and I hadn't started at the brothel yet. Going and founding your own studio or your own business in general, honestly, when you're not making enough money is an absolutely terrible decision because still to this day, I have not profited not one single dollar from queercrush.com. As our site has grown, I have just simply increased payments for our performers and our staff. And so we've been floating for about the last year, like at a break even point. It's just that like we used to be content trade only and now we're making a little bit more money. So now the performers get $200 and content, like things like that. Anyway, that was part of why I started looking into like, what if I did a website? How I came to do this website is so I'm bi, but I'm married to a woman. I know a lot of dykes. And I really felt like there wasn't a lot of porn out there that reflected the reality of the sex that like me and a lot of my friends were having, particularly when it comes to toy stuff and then also like diversity within our community. But especially on the toy front, I think most sort of like traditional lesbian porn is either it's supposed to be all about natural, authentic passion and open mouth kissing, and how dare you bring a dildo in here, or it's like the like big I'm not going to say the name of the site, but like the big shock value types of sites where maybe they use toys, but it'd be like 5 minutes before the scene they're like, by the way, use this strap on, and you don't know if those performers even like strap on sex, if they've ever done it before. They're definitely not accustomed to that particular strap on. And like something we talk about all the time in the interviews for Queer Crush is that like like a strap-on rig is so personal. It is so, and like
Mm.
the way that it fits you, the angle at which the penetration is going to happen, like where on your body your dick sits, that's so personal. And so to have people, even if they do like strap-on sex, and then but they've never used that strap-on, like it's just not going to be. It's not reflective of our community, right?
Mm.
And so I really, when we started the site, it was specifically a lesbian toy site. It was, we're going to make better porn, better lesbian porn showing how like our community actually uses toys. And the only reason I thought about it that way was I was like, this doesn't really exist. And so like that was my thinking, was like that can be our niche within the industry, like how we can set us apart from every other studio.
Mm.
And when I started, I didn't even think about like, and we're going to shoot all kinds of bodies and whatever. Like, I just didn't even really think about it at all. And it wasn't until my business partner, who is a plus size Black woman, was like, she was like, yeah. And so then, do you think like, are we maybe also going to shoot trans women? Is that like a separate site? Like, are we going to shoot plus size women? Is that like a separate site? And like, it wasn't until she said that we had already started shooting a couple of scenes. The site wasn't live yet or anything, but we were like starting to pull content together. And I was like, no, I mean, like, they're not separate within our community. Why would it be a separate site?
Mm.
And so from there, that's sort of like how that became a more important part of our ethos. And pretty quickly we dropped the requirement to use any kind of toy. We are not, I mean, we do like have a lot of toys. Companies send them to us to use for free. I like keep some wand vibes in the studio for people to use, but really it's just about actual queer women and sapphic non-binary folks of all different flavors, varieties, sizes, shapes, experience levels, just doing whatever they want to do. And it wasn't until I was already making this that I realized that that didn't really exist coming from anyone else either.
I love that because, yeah, I think in porn, even in just in society, right? Folks that identify as femme or sapphic, like, are told to not feel pleasure in their bodies, are
Yeah.
told to kind of, just be there for the male gaze and for male pleasure.
Yeah.
And there's just like such a space for that. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and like part of my inspiration was like, okay, so my wife is a butch lesbian. She is not involved in the sex industry at all, except that she is married to me. But like she is not a performer, not a producer. She has a very normal like music business tech type job, not sex industry at all. And she a lot of times over the course of our 7.5 year relationship had talked about how like yeah, like I like the idea of porn. And even a couple of times we've been like, what if we like watch some porn together? But like the reality of a lot of porn is just not. And there are like I don't want to diminish like I, it's not like we're literally the only people to ever come up with this, right? Like for example, Crash Pad is a really great website that has a very similar ethos to ours, but it's broadly queer, it's not lesbian specific. And so
Mm.
they do have great lesbian releases. I have performed for them and it was a lesbian strap-on scene. But it's just not as like if you are like I am a lesbian and I only want to see lesbian porn, I don't want to see all this other stuff, you might not want to subscribe to a website where only some of the releases speak to you. Ours is lesbian specific.
Mm.
There are also like really great performers and couples who make really good content, and if you really like that person or that couple, totally awesome and go for it. Just if you want to see different people doing all kinds of things and have it be lesbian specific, then like we're kind of the only ones.
Mm. Yeah. Question for you. This is another question I have. What was your first step in your journey in sex work?
So I applied to do porn on my 18th birthday. I didn't get a call until I was 19. But in that time, I also, so I guess it kind of depends on how you define starting in sex work, right? Like my first step at all on my 18th birthday, I applied to do porn,
Mhm.
but it took a year to actually make that happen. Right around the same time, I also like, I did not think I was attractive at all, like not even a little bit. And honestly, like I never would have even thought that like I'd get hired to do porn, except that I specifically applied to kink.com, who was a little more diverse in like the types of bodies they shot. And also like I did not, at just turned 18 or like about to turn 18, I didn't have an understanding of like just how big the kink community is. And so my thinking was also like, it's probably really hard for them to find women who like want to get tied up and abused and whatever. So they're probably a little bit more lenient and they would take someone like me who is like not all that attractive, but is very willing to do things. I was wrong. I was plenty attractive. It's just like how I saw
Yeah.
myself. But in the meantime, I signed up on a website called Model Mayhem, which is like a photographers and models connect website. And my thinking was, I don't mind being naked and I definitely could use some side money to supplement my job at the pet store that pays me minimum wage. So like maybe there are like artists out there that they don't necessarily want to draw like a hot girl, they just want to draw like a real girl. And so like maybe I could get some like art modeling that way. So I signed
Mm.
up for the website and went to bed and I woke up the next morning with like 100 messages of people who wanted to shoot me. So I started just booking like nude modeling shoots. And it wasn't porn, but it was like, and this is why I'm like, it kind of depends how do you define starting in sex work, right? Because some people will tell you that 100% is sex work, and some people will tell you it's not. And
Mm.
and I even think it's kind of a gray area. So then, but it was that, and then by the time I finally got called to do, or like around the time I finally got called to do a porn scene, there was this incredible woman. Her name's Puran Maraban. She used to go to UC Berkeley and she wrote for their school newspaper. She wrote a column called Sex on Tuesday, and she was a Berkeley student and she was also a stripper. And a lot of what she wrote really spoke to me as a Northwestern student who was also starting out in porn. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, like I'm going to be in your area. I love your articles. They really resonate with me. I would love to buy you a coffee or something. And she's like, yeah, totally. Also, my roommate and I have a spare bedroom if you want to just stay with us while you're in town. So I stayed with her for like 2 weeks and she did my makeup and I took the train to like go apply at her strip club. And I did not get hired, but I did get a $10 tip on the side stage during my audition. And I've been to that strip club as a customer now, like years
Mm.
later. That like doesn't happen at all. So that really motivated me to be like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna find a strip club that will hire me. And then that was it. Like that was I am like a sex worker is a core part of my identity. Stripping changed my life and like really cemented that like this was going to be my life forever because I want this to be my life forever.
Yeah. What drew you to it at such a young age?
Yeah, so part of it is Well, okay. So the porn story specifically, there's kind of like a few things going on here at the same time. The porn story, I've told the story before. So when I was pretty young, a friend and I like, I didn't really understand sex. I didn't like know anything at all. A friend and I thought that it would be really funny to go to boobs.com. We were like, oh my God, tee, like boob, like what is at boobs.com? So we went to boobs.com. At the time, this isn't true anymore, but at the time it was an affiliate directory of different porn sites. And what happened to be on the front page that day was kink.com's rope bondage site, hogtied.com. And so we open it up, and my friend is like, oh my God, ew, gross. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, ew, gross. And I went back to it privately later. And I was like, okay, this is so weird because this kind of looks like the things that go on in my head when I do that weird wiggling thing that I'm only just now starting to piece together may possibly be masturbation, but I'm really young and like do not know any of this. So like I don't totally get it. And I like kept going back and watching the free previews and was super into it. And then I was like, something's got to be horribly wrong with me, right? Like I must hate women, like seeing these women like in bondage and suffering. And then I was like, is porn addiction? Like, is that what this is? Because I keep wanting to look at it, even though I think like it's bad that I'm looking at it. And I know I'm like not supposed to look at it. And then I finally saw an exit interview from a kink.com scene where the model talks about like what she liked and what she didn't like. And I would totally come back and shoot with you again. And then you see like the 2257 record keeping compliance statement and like all models are properly compensated. And it was only then that it really clicked in my head that like these are models who are hired to do these scenes. It's not, I mean, like it is real, but it's not like real, you know?
Yeah.
It's a negotiated scene, right? Like I did not have any concept of the kink community or how any of these things work at the time. So that's kind of how I learned that. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what? Like, who would do a thing like that even for money? Like, who would do that? And then I was like, wait a second. I would totally do a thing like that, like even without money. So there must be other people out there who are like me. And I remember this moment really clearly. And it was such a key moment for me in accepting myself like as a sexual being, which was then such a key component of accepting myself broadly. And I really think is like a huge part of why I have always been like so self-assured and so confident in who I am, like from such a super young age. So I knew that I really wanted to get back to that as soon as I was old enough. Also, there was an element that was like, man, like I'm really into like gear and devices and things, and that shit's all really expensive. And when it comes to kink, like you need to really know what you're doing. So part of me was like, wow, like it's like getting paid to have all my dreams come true. Like, yeah, you can hire me. And it's totally not that simple having done it now. But that is why I knew like on my 18th birthday, I'm gonna do this.
I love that story. Thanks for sharing. Just hearing you speak, I have this theory that some people really like kink is a sexual orientation, right? Like some people are like, I don't know, like I was kinky from the very beginning, you know,
Yeah.
like these things really drew me in. And especially, I know you said that you work with clients that are neurodivergent, but I also find that there seems to be a correlation with people that are neurodivergent and kinky. Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
just like, yeah, it seems like it goes together.
Yeah, hugely. I was actually just having a really similar conversation with Cody Bohr. We were talking about how, and actually she talked about this in her interview for her Quick Crush scene, about how for her, and I used to be this way, but I don't know that I am as much anymore. But for her, the sort of kink factors, the surrounding scenario, or at a bare minimum, the like what backstory is going on in my head while these activities are happening
Mhm.
are more important for the arousal and the excitement and the enjoyment than actually the specific activity or even the specific person. So like when we were asking her about like how'd you first realize you were queer, one big thing she was talking about is like, well, like gender is way less important to me than the way that they will hurt me or play this particular role or do all of these particular kinky things. And I think that's actually like really common.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, going back. So you went and you were like, I got $10. I'm going for it. Like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find a strip club nearby and I'm gonna start
Yeah.
stripping. So that was kind of your first step maybe into the career of sex
Yeah.
work. You're making
Yeah, into the
money.
career for sure. Even though I had already, like, by the time I started dancing full time, I definitely had already shot two porn scenes. I possibly had done three, but it was like not going to be, it was like nice side money here or there. It was pretty clear right away that it wasn't going to be like tons of money coming in. No, and also like I have known for so long that I wanted to do porn. I never in a million years thought that I would be a porn star. Like I never even considered it as a possible career. It was more like a bucket list item. So I was in college, I was studying physics and linguistics at Northwestern, And I did it. I did porn. And so like to me, that was a success. And I wasn't getting more work, and no agent wanted to work with me because I was a size 8 from Chicago who already had tattoos. And also I didn't know this at the time. And sometimes I have regrets about this, but actually I think I'm glad it went the way that it did. There are like a conglomerate of like new girl porn websites that
Mhm.
won't shoot you if you've done anything yet. So the fact that I went and I shot 3 BDSM scenes, which actually weren't for kink, they were for a different site, but then I eventually did get to shoot for kink like as more of an adult after I moved to Vegas. Um, Anyway, the like new girl sites won't shoot you having already done that. And the new
Mhm.
girl sites also pay like way more than industry standards. So like that kind of sucks that I lost that opportunity. But I also like I don't want things to have been all that different because I wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm really happy with where I am today. So anyway, okay, so I'm in college. I'm not getting more porn work. I meet the stripper from UC Berkeley and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be a stripper. And I started stripping. I stripped my way through college. It radically changed my life. It completely changed my relationship to my body, my relationship to money, my relationship to like the economy. It gave me a sense of security and independence that like I hadn't really been able to find previously. I come from a family that was very wealthy when I was extremely little, like elementary school age, and then had a really, really, really significant financial shift wherein both of my parents' houses were foreclosed on and we
Mhm.
were on food stamps and almost couldn't get Medicaid and then did and things were just like really touch and go and
Mhm.
scary. So I had been working nearly full time. I worked 35 hours a week while I was in high school. Um, so at my pet store for minimum wage. And my family, like my grandma ended up taking out like a second mortgage and buying a little townhouse for my mom and my sister and I to stay in so that we could finish school in the same school district. So like my grandma was paying the mortgage and we had food stamps. So like rent and utilities and food were covered, but everything else was on me, not because my family didn't want to support me, but because they couldn't. So I'm talking even like shampoo, like school supplies, like basic clothes, not just like, oh, like I want this new dress, but like necessities to go to school. Like all of that was on me from the time I was like 15, 16.
Mhm.
So going to college, I was really thankful to have really good financial aid that was paying for college. Like I graduated from Northwestern with $5,000 in student loans with 2 degrees from
Oh,
Northwestern.
wow.
Yeah, but also like to be able to like live and function while going to school was really stressful. And dancing gave me so people talk about sex work being easy money. And they're wrong, but I do get the point that they're making. It's not that it's easy money, it's that it is accessible money. When I was in college, there was no other way that I could maintain a full course load at a top 10 university and have like only having ever worked at pet stores or whatever and be making that type of money while going to school. That doesn't mean it was easy. It's incredibly challenging and it doesn't work for a lot of people, but it did work for me and it like radically changed my life. So then just sort of to like summarize how I ended up where I am today from that, I danced through college, I graduated college, I went to school to be a forensic scientist. I was working in cold case investigation for a little while, and then I couldn't work with cops anymore. So I switched to do localization for like medical questionnaires, documents used in clinical drug trials. And I was doing that, and I was also dancing still. And then in 2019, I had 3 surgeries and I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it kept me out of the strip club like all year. And I accumulated $10,000 in medical debt. And then I was back in the strip club in March of 2020 for
Ooh.
1 week.
Ooh.
And then everything shut down. And thankfully, my day job, I could work remotely. It was not a big deal. And it was totally enough money to live off of. It was not enough money to deal with the medical debt. So I hopped on the OnlyFans train, like many other people. Ended up making enough money in 4 months to pay off all my medical debt and buy my horse, who's like my entire world outside of work now. Thank you. And then through that, I like met another OnlyFans model who connected me with her agent. And I like bounced around between a few agents before settling on my current agent, whom I actually sincerely love. But that's how I ended up back in porn. So then in March of 21, I quit my day job to be a sex worker full time. In October of 21, I moved to Las Vegas from Chicago for my job. In June of 22, I first pitched the idea of Queer Crush to my business partner. We launched in September of 22, and then I started at the brothel in February of 23. So actually next week when I go back to work after my little winter break, it will be my second anniversary at the brothel.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I want to talk more about Sherry's and more about your brothel work too,
Yeah.
because part of my work, and we talked about this before, but making sex work more the norm and like making it accessible. Like, yeah, it's something that you can actually do legally in the United States, which I think some
Yeah.
people don't know. Tell me more about, for someone that like knows nothing, okay, or like maybe it was maybe their first time of wanting to procure sex work.
Yeah.
Why is a brothel the way to go versus going on backpage.com or something like that?
Yeah, well, Backpage doesn't exist anymore, and we can thank Kamala Harris personally for that. Thanks,
Oh yeah.
Kamala.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I understand the question that you're asking. Well, so okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is that it's not necessarily the right choice for everybody. Going to a brothel in the United States is typically much more expensive than you pay rates to see someone independently. That's not like unanimously 100% true. There certainly are specific independent escorts who have higher rates than mine. There are also brothels that are a little bit less expensive than mine. But in general, like the drawbacks, right, to the brothel system are you have to travel to the brothel in Nevada. You can't like have the girls come to you. And you do typically pay a premium rate for the fact that it is legal and above board. The benefits are there is no chance of being arrested. It is completely 100% legal, like even federally. There's this misconception that prostitution is illegal federally, and that's completely not true. The only federal laws about it are about it can't be within a certain distance of a military base. It obviously can't involve minors or folks who are coerced into it. And you can't move someone across state lines for the purpose of sex work, even if they're consenting, which is why the brothels don't offer like flight assistance or anything like that, because that would actually be legally designated as trafficking, even if it's like an adult who approached the brothel and was like, I would like to work at your brothel. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. But there's no federal law saying it's illegal. So actually going and purchasing services at a brothel in Nevada is more legal than going and buying weed at a dispensary. And
Mhm.
that also means like, yes, we do take credit and debit cards. No, there's no risk of like your bank shutting you down because they saw you use your credit card at the brothel. We are a completely legal, regulated, licensed business, which is pretty cool. Another big benefit to the brothel system specifically is the safety element, right? Like you know that when you show up there, you are going to actually like really see the women that are on the website for real. You're not getting someone who's trying to scam you or someone who's trying to rob you. There is security there. You know for a fact that everybody working there is at my brothel over the age of 21. There are some that are 18 and up, but mine is 21 and up. And like wants to be there at least in the sense that like anybody wants to be at their job, right? Like I love my job. I truly, truly love it. There are also plenty of sex workers who like it's a job and they don't necessarily love it.
Why do
But
you
like
love it? Like, what are the things you love about it?
yeah, I love the impact that I get to have on people's lives. I love like getting to make people feel good and having their dreams come true. And also like I have always had kind of a seduction kink and like making someone want me so badly. And so making someone want me so badly that they're willing to spend a moderate to large sum of money to have me is like very inherently hot to me. I also like love sex as a service. Like I have all sorts of fantasies about like, oh, like my partner's friend had a bad day, so my partner asks me to go make their friend feel good or whatever. Like just like those types of sex as a service fantasies. And so then being able to do sex as a service as part of my job is really cool. Another benefit specifically to coming to a brothel is that you know our STI status. In Nevada, it is the law that we have to be tested every 7 days, and those tests are reported to the state. So, in order for us to be working, in order for our work cards to be valid, we have to have had a test within at least the last 7 days. It is also the law that we have to use barriers with all clients for any sort of fluid exchange involving genitals. That's so weird for me to say because I'm used to saying this on TikTok. So my automatic phrasing is any sort of fluid exchange involving the downstairs, but I can use real words with you.
You
That's so
can't.
great. So I know for a lot of people that level of safety is very comforting for them to know that like I am not going to contract an STI from going to the brothel. In fact, there have not been any documented cases of STI transmission in a Nevada brothel since barriers and testing were mandated in the 80s in response to the AIDS crisis. So we actually have really good data on this because every 7 days our tests are reported.
Yeah, I find it so interesting when people think like, oh, like, women that do sex work like are more likely to be dirty or just I'm like, okay, the women that work at the brothel
Mhm.
are by far in better health than the woman you picked up on the dating app at the bar. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you at least know for a fact that, the person that you are connecting with, sleeping with has gotten tested and is in good health.
yeah. I want to just take a quick moment to acknowledge the something that I think is not talked about often enough in our culture, especially in that contracting an STI is not a moral failing. It can happen to any sexually active person, and it doesn't mean that you're dirty or that there's anything wrong with you or that you did anything wrong. And I'll be really transparent. I have had chlamydia once and I've had MGen once, and both of them I got from porn. I've never contracted an STI. In my 2 years that I've been at the brothel, I have not had an STI at all. And that said, yes, when you go to see a sex worker, like we take our sexual health really seriously because not only does it impact our health, it also impacts our livelihood, right? And our ability to work. And so and I'm not saying that people who work at brothels are the only sex workers who take that seriously. That's not true at all. Most sex workers take their sexual health extremely seriously. I just know that from a client perspective, sometimes it is very comforting to know like every 7 days they are tested and it is reported to the state. And that is specific to the brothel.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. Yeah, because experiencing an STI is an immoral failing. And I have run into so many people that have had so much shame around this,
Yeah.
right? I got chlamydia once. Like, I mean, it happens, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? If you're sexually active, it happens.
yes. When I tested positive for chlamydia, I lost my mind. I had already been like working in sex education for years and telling people for years that contracting an STI is not a moral failing and it's okay. And like I had consoled a family member through a pretty significant STI diagnosis and like it's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not dirty. You will have a sex life. And she does still have a sex life. And even still, I learned when I had chlamydia that apparently like I didn't actually feel that way about myself internalized. And I had to do like a lot of unpacking of that.
Yeah. What's your ideal client?
Oh man, I don't think I have one ideal client. Although I guess, okay, any of my ideal clients I would share a few factors, and that's they have thought about what they want. They don't need to know like exactly a whole script, but they have considered it and they know like these are the type of things that I'm looking for versus someone who comes in and is like, I don't know what's on the menu or whatever. Like I can work with that, but it's so much easier if you have sort of like an idea of what you're looking for. And like the better you're able to communicate with me, the better, right? Like if you can tell me, I know I don't like these things, I know I want to try this, that's so helpful for me. I see so many different types of clients. I see folks of all genders, all ages over the age of 21, all body sizes, like all different types of experience levels. I do love people who are interested in some type of a first time. And that can be like literally because they're a virgin. It also could be like, I see women who've never been with women before, or have like never experienced a strap on before, or like people who've never been pegged, they've always wanted to be pegged. And that's like one of my specialties. So I love helping people, or people who have like, I've always had this role play fantasy, but I've never been able to act it out, or I've been too nervous to tell someone that I want to do this. But I know that like you, a professional, is not going to judge you. I love parties like that.
Yeah. How do you think hiring a sex worker helps with sexual shame?
Yeah, that's a really good question and actually like kind of a tough one because I sometimes forget this is so normalized to me. I forget that there's like a stigma associated with seeing a sex worker. Like I know there's a stigma associated with being a sex worker, but I forget about the stigma associated with seeing one. And so sometimes people will ask me like especially on TikTok if I like think any differently of my clients after they see me. And it took me a really long time to figure out what they were asking because I was like I mean, I guess like I'm thankful that they came to see me and supported my business. Like, and sometimes I'm like, that guy was really great. Like, I hope I get to see him again soon. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that guy kind of sucked. I hope I don't see him again. Oh, well. But like, that's the extent of it. And actually, what people are asking me is like, do you judge people? Do you think that, especially like who come to see you, which again, not all my clients are men, but many of them are. Do you think that like the men who come to see you are misogynists or like, do you judge them in some way? And like, absolutely not. I'm thankful that they wanted to come and support my business. And I think that thankfully, I do think that sort of like general societal perceptions around this are starting to change. And I think that like there's something to be said for taking your sexuality into your own hands, right? And so if you know I really want to try this thing. I really want to have sex for the first time. I really want to have this type of an experience. And like maybe you've kind of tried through other avenues to make it happen, but it's not really working. If you can contact a professional or contact a few professionals and say, here's what I want to do. Can you help me? And you find someone who's like, yeah, totally, I want to help you with that. And then you get to make it happen. Like, I think there is a real sense of empowerment, like as a client there, to be like, not only did I get to have this experience that I've been wanting, but like I made it happen and I have control over my body and my destiny and the experiences that I get to have.
Yes. No, I love that. I talk a lot about this too. It's like erotic sovereignty, right? Like being so
Yeah.
and like owning your desires and sometimes just being able to be seen in your
Yes.
desires just melt shame away because you have someone there that's not judging you, that's having fun with you and like
Yeah.
having taking part in the experience with you. So I love that. Question though. So what are some things that do suck, right? Like what are some things you shouldn't do when you go to a brothel?
Yeah, the number one thing is acting rude or entitled. Because okay, so the courtesans at the brothel are all independent contractors. That means we choose our own services and we set our own pricing. There are sort of like ballpark ranges. Like in most cases, it's not like one person's going to charge you $100 and one person's going to charge you $10,000 for the very same act. But we have control over our own prices. And to an extent, that also means like we can decide if and when we give discounts and things. So if someone walks into my office and we start talking and we get to price and they go, oh, whoa, that's way too much. Okay, well, have a nice day. Versus if someone comes in with the attitude of, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I understand that's your pricing. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm sure it's worth it. That's just out of my budget. That is a totally different attitude and is someone that I am absolutely willing to work with. Maybe I'll offer a discount. Maybe we can do a shorter version of the package that's less expensive. Maybe we can make sure I can match your budget and we're going to do 75% of all the things you wanted to do, just not 100%. Like I'm so happy and willing to make it work. It's just when people are rude and entitled, they don't get any flexibility. And sometimes I will actually just completely decline to see someone because I don't like their attitude.
Yeah. What are your specialties? I know you said that strap-on is one of your
Yeah, toy
specialties.
stuff broadly, especially strap-on. Couples and like queer experiences. Group things, even if it's like multiple of us courtesans, love group things. First times of all variety. And then right now we're in limbo where our brothel, a couple of the brothels can't offer anal because like there's a testing situation going on and like we're trying to get the laws changed surrounding testing. But when that is available and above board, porn has taught me to be very, very good at anal. So I have gotten to see a few people and be like, their first time trying like anal, like on me anal.
Yeah, I saw that recently because I saw that Sherry's Ranch did hire a trans courtesan, and then that's what started this, right? I've been following
Kind of,
along.
yeah. So the story with Jade is really complicated. Jade is a really good friend of mine. I actually shot her for Queer Crush like long before she ever worked at the brothel. I'm not going to tell the whole story because it's Jade's story to tell.
Yeah.
It's not my story to tell, and I'm sure she would love to come and do your podcast too if you ask her.
Yes. Oh,
I can
yes.
I can connect you if you want.
Please
But
do. Yeah.
Jade, so the laws that outline testing actually very specifically say if the courtesan is male or transgendered, here's how you do the testing. It also says that for a house to offer anal, for anybody at the house to offer anal, all of the courtesans have to get a rectal swab, even if not all of them are offering anal. Well, Jade wasn't offering anal, and Cherries was perfectly fine having her there, no problem at all. And then the county commissioner came back and said, how can you possibly have a trans girl working there if she's not offering anal? Either the entire house needs to get swabbed or you can't have her work there. And so the madam said, okay, we'll just have the entire house get swabbed. And then certain factors outside the control of the house made it so that that's currently not possible. However, me and a colleague from my ranch are working with a team of sociologists from UNLV who have experience in public policy to just get the laws changed and fixed.
It's so crazy too because Nevada is pretty conservative, right? Like living in Vegas, I'm like, this is a pretty conservative state, but there's also these like very open laws when it comes to things like sex work, right? So it's
Yeah, so
there's this imbalance almost that just kind of doesn't make sense to me
yeah,
at times.
historically, Nevada has been pretty libertarian, and I mean that in a philosophically libertarian sense. I
Yeah.
don't mean like the current existing Libertarian Party. I mean the Nevada historically has been very like everybody should just be allowed to do what they want. stay out of my business, which is like kind of a conservative ideal, actually. Like the like or like is it's how conservatives want you to think they are, right? Like, just let me do my thing, freedom, stay out of my business. But like, actually is not like the reality of conservatism these days. So historically, Nevada has been very like, yeah, you can see a sex worker if you want. Yeah, you can get gay married if you want, just stay out of my business. So Nevada has had like very strong firearms protections. But at the same time, Nevada codified gay marriage actually after the Supreme Court decision. So even though they didn't need to, just because they felt like they should, which is pretty cool. Nevada's always been big on like individual freedoms and liberties. And it's cool that the laws that allow trans women to work at the brothels were changed in, I can't remember if it's 2009 or 2014. Previously, only folks with a cervix could be a courtesan at a brothel. And that means that even me, like I had a hysterectomy. I would not be able to be a courtesan anymore because the testing mandated an endocervical swab, and that was it. So like if you were a cis guy, too bad, no cervix, can't be a courtesan. Those laws were changed in, again, either 2009 or 2014. So like fairly recently throughout the history of the brothels. And it really sucks that even though like we explicitly have outlines for testing trans women to work as a courtesan, like I said, it is an ongoing saga. It is not over, and hopefully we will have some updates soon.
I definitely am going to keep my eye on this because I think it's so interesting. And yeah, I saw that male courtesans were made legal. I forgot. I had to look back, but it looked like there was a brothel that tried to be a
Mhm.
male only brothel. I don't think they did. I think they failed, but men can be courtesans
Yeah,
in
in fact,
Nevada, can't they?
just within the last couple months, Bella's Hacienda hired a man, and my understanding is he still works there and is the only active male courtesan. But yeah, the law change was actually so that that male brothel could be a male brothel because
Mhm.
previously it wasn't legal. But the testing laws are pretty outdated. Like for example, it still mandates an internal vaginal swab for chlamydia and gonorrhea testing. So it's still an endocervical swab for folks who have a cervix. There is like special wording for like if the courtesan has undergone a hysterectomy, or I forget exactly what the wording is, but basically like if you used to have a cervix and you don't anymore, here is how you do the swab. But like modern urine testing is almost as effective as that type of a swab. And modern, I forget the word for it, but when you do a swab that's just like a tiny bit inside your vagina versus like literally like we have to go in the doctor's office and get speculum.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah.
Right. No, just like a little, like it can even be like self-done. You insert the swab is equally as effective as an endocervical swab. So that's another reason that this colleague and I want the laws to be changed, because it's number one, it's unnecessarily expensive when they're speculuming all of us, and it's unnecessarily invasive. And then also just like it doesn't always make sense in all cases.
Yeah, no, totally. So part of, this is the law, right? Around barriers for anything fluid
Yeah.
exchange, correct?
Specifically fluid exchange involving the genitals. Because when I say barriers for fluid exchange, people are like, oh, so kissing is illegal, which it is not. But like oral sex would be illegal without a barrier.
What about like golden showers?
I think that's probably somewhat of a gray area that is not talked about in the law.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Well, yeah, as far as like kink and fetish in the brothel, like, coming from more of a BDSM background, I think of people that work in dungeons, right?
Yeah.
Like, how much crossover can there be in the brothel for people that are really kinky? So someone wants to come in and maybe do some harder BDSM
Yeah.
stuff. Are there courtesans that do that there
Yes,
or?
there are. It's not super common within our client base. The vast majority of clients, and again, this is me speaking about Sherry's specifically because I haven't worked at the other ranches, although I would be surprised if this was significantly different anywhere else. The vast majority of clients who come in are looking for something fairly vanilla. They're looking for like kind of a girlfriend experience, or maybe like a I've never been pegged, or like I've never tried it. Could you tie me up and be a little bit mean to me? We don't see a lot of people that are looking for heavy kink. That said, there are plenty of us who have personal experience or professional experience from outside the brothel who are absolutely equipped to handle those types of things. Like Sherry's has a dungeon. It's relatively small, but like has a dungeon with dungeon and furniture and some equipment, and I bring some of my own equipment. What I would say for folks who are interested in going to a brothel specifically for a pretty significant kink experience is definitely reach out to the courtesan or courtesans that you are interested in seeing in advance. And that way you can talk about things that you're interested in, make sure that it's something that they offer, and also just make sure they're prepared for you. Because, like, for example, at home, I have an entire double wide dresser literally overflowing with sex things. Like, there's one drawer where every time I open it, I have to make sure it's like exactly perfectly balanced or it won't close. But I only bring one backpack with me, usually, of sex toys and gear when I go to the brothel. So it could be, if you were like, well, I know Electra does these types of kinks, I'll just show up. I wouldn't necessarily like know to be prepared for you. Whereas if you reached out to me in advance, I could make sure I have everything.
So let's say there's someone, okay, let's say I have a kink that I want to explore with a courtesan and I want to reach out to you to figure out, do you do these things? Like, can you just take me through the process for anyone who's listening? Like,
Yeah.
if you want to procure sex work, how through Sherry's Ranch, through you in particular, like, how would you do that?
Yeah, so if you go on the website for Sherry's Ranch, you'll be able to see like all the courtesans that work there. The homepage will just have the people who are there like right now. If you know when you're thinking of going, you can search by date and put in your dates and see who's signed up to be there at those dates. Sometimes if it's like very far in the future, you might only see some people because people haven't signed up yet. But you also can search by name or just sort of like browse on there. And then you can read profiles and sort of compare the profiles and be like, oh, who am I interested in seeing? And then on the profiles where it'll have like pictures of me or whomever and all about us and our schedule for the next few months. And then there's like a contact me button that gives you a ranch email address. And so it's like electrarayne@cherries.net or something. And that's our like official ranch email for official correspondence, and you can reach out to us that way. Don't be discouraged if you don't get a response right away because we can only check those email addresses while we're on site at the ranch. So right now, like I take January off, which means off of that job, not off of my million other jobs, which means I haven't been there since December. So when I go next week, I will actually have like 2 months of emails to get back to. And I hate this system and I hope that they change it soon, but that is how it is. If you have a little bit more pressing concern, like say you're thinking of going like in the next few weeks or like on that trip that's going to be the next time she's there, look her up on social media. Twitter is usually the best for messaging us, or Blue Sky, but Instagram is fine too. Don't DM me on TikTok. Please do not DM me on TikTok.
Okay, great. And then what? So then they just book a time or a slot, and then like I'm trying to think about how do people prepare, like when they show up, like
Yeah.
what should they, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So reach out to us, especially if you have something specific that you're looking for, and then we'll be like, yeah, like I'd love to see you, or hey, I don't do that, but here's someone who might. Then you can make an appointment either using the ranch website or by calling. I usually recommend calling because you'll get a confirmation right away. Versus online, you'll be like, I'm requesting 5 p.m. on this date, and you have to wait for someone in the office to like look and see is she available at that time. On the phone, you will have like your clear yes or no figured out immediately. Then the ranch does offer a complimentary limo from either the airport or like your hotel in Las Vegas. It will both increase the prices that you pay for services and decrease the percentage that the working ladies get to keep. So please do not take the limo. The cheapest option is to just rent a car from Vegas. It's like usually maybe $30 for a day, $60 if it's like a really in-demand day. It's not expensive. There's plenty of parking. It's a pretty drive. If you are concerned about drinking or being too tired after your party, there is an on-site hotel at Sherry's. It's like your own private room. We don't bother you in the hotel room. So I say just, it will, I promise you, it will still be cheaper if you were like, yeah, I'll rent a car and I'll drive over and I'll sleep at their hotel and I'll drive back in the morning. The hotel room and the car, you will still spend significantly less money than you would have spent on services had you taken the limo.
Got it. Yeah, and let's say someone's like, I'm not really sure, or I want to be able to like meet people in person and people want to just
Yeah.
come live. What does that look like for someone to just kind of show up at the ranch?
Yeah. So I'll go over kind of like all the ways that a lady can meet a client. So at Sherry's, there are 5 different ways a lady can meet a client can meet a lady. Some of the houses don't have a bar, so fewer options, but we have 5 ways. Number 1 is an appointment in advance, just like we just talked about. Number 2 is a request. A request would be like, let's say that you are familiar with me, you know I work at Sherry's, but you like weren't sure if you wanted to make an appointment, but then you show up and you're like, I do want to see Electra, I don't have an appointment. That would be a request. Or a request might also be you saw me walk through the bar with a friend. I didn't stop to talk to anyone, you just saw me. And so you grab staff and you're like, hey, like, who was that girl with the blue tattoo? Like, I'd like to see her. We also have monitors in the bar that cycle through the photos of all the ladies who are working. So if you were sitting in the bar having a drink and then you're like, whoa, that, and it says her name on it, like, Electra's so beautiful. And so you tell staff, can I please talk to Electra? And they'll call me. Those are all different types of a request. So appointment request, you can just meet a lady in the bar. You can just hang out in the bar and eat and drink. The restaurant's actually pretty good and it's a full bar. And ladies will come and approach you. We get 10 minutes to talk to you before we have to move on and like make space for someone else to talk to you. So just like kind of meeting someone naturally. You also can have them do a bar call. A bar call is when you want to talk to usually like a bunch of different ladies, or there just like aren't enough ladies in the bar when you show up, and they call all the available ladies to the bar so that we can each talk to you for 10 minutes. It's kind of like speed dating. And then finally is the lineup, which is kind of the sort of classic option that people think of when they've seen like old movies and things. Lineups are good if you want to pick someone just based on looks. You don't care about getting to like talk in advance or get to know them. You don't get to ask questions. They seat you in the parlor in this middle couch. We come out from like both sides. It's super choreographed. And one at a time, we like cross the floor and introduce ourselves. But literally all we are allowed to say is, hi, I'm Electra. And that's it, get back in line. I once got in trouble for curtsying when I introduced myself. So it's very like we are just supposed to be like as plain and just introduce yourself and get back in line as possible. You don't get to ask follow-up questions. You just pick who looks best to you and then off you go.
So after you meet a lady, pick a lady that you perhaps want to work with, what's the next step? What's the negotiation look like?
Yeah. So then you go back to our rooms, which also function as our offices, and we do a negotiation. And that's both a negotiation in like the literal business sense, like how much time are we going to do? How much money are you going to spend? But also a scene negotiation. And so that looks a little bit different for everybody. Like everyone does their negotiations a little differently. You come, you sit on my bed with me, and we talk about like everything that you want to do, things you know you don't like, experiences that you've had before or that you haven't. And we talk about like, what's your budget? Do I offer these things? What do we want it to look like? What room do we want to do it in? How much time do we want to spend? Are we going to get food? Most parties include complimentary food and drinks. So we just figure out like all of the details together. Some ladies use like a physical menu or a digital menu. I do have a physical menu, but I usually only use it if a client doesn't really have an idea of what they want. If they say like, I know I want it to look like this, I was thinking we'd spend 2 or 3 hours, usually I will just be like, great, here's the price for that. And we don't have to spend time looking at the menu, but I do have one. But there are some ladies who like, you're going to go to their room and they're going to say like, here's my menu. Do you have any questions? And that doesn't mean you can't say like, I noticed that hand job wasn't on the menu. Does that mean I can't get a hand job? Like, of course you can still ask follow-up questions. Like, well, do you do spanking even if it wasn't on the menu? Everybody does their negotiation a little differently.
So how is sex different with a client than it is with your personal life with your wife?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is something I think that like people have a really hard time with and confuses them a lot. But so imagine you're going to get coffee with a friend, like you're just getting coffee with a friend, versus if you're going on a coffee date, like you have asked someone out romantically or they asked you out and you have this coffee date. In both cases, you're going through the same physical actions. You might even go to the same coffee shop and order the same drink and pastry. But the way that you feel and you might love both of these experiences. They're both very enjoyable and very fun, and you are enjoying the time that you're spending with this person and you're enjoying your coffee treat. But the way that you're going to feel in those situations is going to be different when it's just like, I'm going with my friend versus I am on a date right now. And I think that is a really good analogy to explain the way sex with a client is different. And honestly, most sex that I have for work, be it in porn or at the brothel or whatever, versus sex in my personal life. I do genuinely enjoy both of them, but they're very, very different for me.
Yeah, well, have you ever had it where a client, you know that you're sitting there and having a coffee on a friend date, but then the client gets like either overly attached or feels like it's more romantic or more involved than it actually is? And like, how do you handle that when you perhaps have a client that maybe projects, falls in love? Like, I don't know if you've had that happen or not.
I have a little bit, but I think the wrapper of a brothel actually kind of inhibits that a little bit because, like, it's not like we're scheduling whenever they want to. It's not like we're going to whatever place they want. Like, they have to come to my place of business in order to see me. Like, we don't do outdates. We don't leave the property with clients at Sherry's. There are northern ranches that do outdates, and maybe it's a little bit different for them, but not where I work. So that helps a little bit. I think I actually encounter this more often with like online fans who think that we have like a real relationship. And it's tricky because like it's true to an extent. Like long-term regular clients can mean a lot to me and be very important to me. In fact, there was like a year-ish ago, I had to break up with my biggest, actually, he was a brothel regular, but also like all sorts of online interactions and things. And I also broke up with a guy that I was dating in the same week. And the breakup with the guy I was seeing was so like not actually a big deal. In fact, I was kind of even like, do I even have to break up with him? Can I kind of just like stop seeing him? I don't know, like it's not that serious. And the breakup with my client was huge and very challenging, like emotionally to deal with, because that was a really important relationship for me and I did care about him, but he also like was still a client, right? And it's interesting for me because like I've had people, I could think of one specifically online who get very like, it's just weird that I have to pay you to be able to talk to you because I feel like we have such a connection, blah, blah, blah. When like, I don't know, I saw the same nail tech every 3 weeks for like 7 years when I still lived in Chicago. And I loved her so much. And we have gone to brunch together. And she texted me from the hospital when her baby daughter was born. And like, we're very close. And so now when I go back to visit, I always make sure to get my nails done with her and I give her $100 for a manicure. Like, I love her and I value the service that she provides for me. And so it's even more important to me to be like, hey, your services are so valuable and I respect the work that you do for me. Here is extra money. I want to take care of you more because we have this close relationship. And so having had like personal experiences like that, I am a little like, are you fucking kidding me? When people are basically like, but I love you so much, I don't want to pay you anymore.
You're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. It doesn't make any sense, actually.
I feel like, especially with, because I did online sex work, I did cam modeling and OnlyFans and all of that during the pandemic, actually. I was in my house and I was like, hey, seems like a fun way to make money. And it was. But I noticed that a lot of the clients online tend to, and maybe this is just my experience, because they're primarily online, I tend to notice they have a lot of shame. They have more
Yeah.
self-worth issues than people that will boldly just walk into the brothel and be like, hey, what's up? And I just noticed like people that tend to have these kinds of like shame or self-worth issues tend to project onto other people like the love and affection that they should be showing themselves really onto this
Yeah.
other person, and that this attachment can be created. And there is, and it is a little hairy, especially when you're doing kind of like girlfriend experience stuff, where it's like you are kind of, crossing into this emotional realm that you probably, I guess with the nail tech, right? But the service was very clear. It's like you're doing my nails. There's like this physical
Yeah.
thing that you're doing. Whereas in the like girlfriend experience, it's like, yeah, we're trading money for content, but we're still kind of maybe connecting here and there where there maybe isn't, a transaction or a payment happening. But yeah, so it's like I can see it getting hairy, specifically, especially with the online stuff.
Yeah, especially with the online stuff. In person, I mean, in general, I'm really good at asserting my boundaries. That was like actually one of the great things about starting stripping it is that I like really learned like like here's my boundaries and I don't want your money if you're not going to respect them. But it is definitely trickier online. But when it comes to things like that level of projection, I think also I do like a little bit of redirecting when I have to. So like one of my biggest used phrases on my online sites is, hey, have you ever considered speaking to a therapist about this? I know, so sexy, right? And so it's like, I don't want to, when it's that type of a thing, it's not just like, I love you, which is its own set of problems and maybe also something they should talk to a therapist about. But when it's also a little bit too much of the like, here I am using you as a therapist, putting my problems on you, etc. I don't want to abandon these people because I don't want to send them spiraling. But I also am like, okay, we need to sort of put this relationship in a container and figure out like what parts are going to stay in here and what parts are going to stay on the outside.
Yeah, I know for me personally, that's part of the reason why I stopped doing the online work. Well, specifically because I was doing like kink stuff. So, people just shut off the camera. You can do proper aftercare or like, are you actually okay after we
Yeah.
just did that scene? People can just bounce and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
And yeah, there was a couple of times that I was like, ooh, I don't know. Like I didn't really get a chance to debrief with that person. And because it's so anonymous, it's like people can just come and go in and out of your
Yeah.
field and you don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is electrarayne.net. That's Electra with a C, not a K, and Rayne is spelled Rayne. Or if it's easy to remember, you can go to chicagoslut.com and that will link you. And then that's got links to like anything else that you want. And then of course for Queer Crush, you can always check it out and subscribe at queercrush.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.